So, recently we made a video on the kill count of every Assassin's Creed protagonist, and from that video we got another idea. If these are the most dangerous assassins, then what about the Templars? Sure, we mentioned a few before, but a full dedicated video breaking down the most absurd and insane feats of some of the most dangerous Templars is an absolute must. And since you guys love rankings, as always we'll be deciding who the most dangerous one is from each game based on their feats. And trust me, you're going to be shocked by who ends up dominating the list. This time around, we decided to start chronologically with Odyssey. And technically, this game doesn't have Templars because, well, you know, they didn't exist yet. But we did have the cult, and because of that, our options were limited. The only members with real weight and impact were Deimos, Aspasia, and Cleon. So for this video, we're going with Deimos. And there's a lot of reasons why. Deimos is Cassandra's half-brother, and since Cassandra is also an Isu-human hybrid, that changes everything. All the things that Cassandra can do, Deimos can too. He has the same exact blood running through his veins, but with one major advantage: he doesn't have limits. From the very beginning, he was brainwashed by the cult to do their dirty work, turning him into a literal killing machine. So every time we see him in the game, he's either angry or killing someone. And in some moments, he even goes toe-to-toe with Cassandra, but hesitates only because he wants answers about his past. Which he does in a very, friendly way.
You'll have to be stronger than that.
But his ruthlessness is clear. The entire cult feared him, and he led them more than Aspasia ever did. And here's a fun fact most people don't know about. He also wields an Isu weapon, probably found in the same place as Cassandra's spear. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool, so I had to share it with you. So based on his ruthlessness, lack of empathy, raw strength, and mastery of Isu weapons, Deimos stands as the most dangerous Templar-esque figure in Odyssey. But this is just the beginning. You haven't even seen the truly dangerous ones yet. Similar to Odyssey, we had a plethora of options to choose from, since every Order member had a proper role in the storyline. And to keep the video factual and to the point, we deliberately avoided including their leader, Flavius. Yes, he causes a lot of suffering in side quests, and yes, that's evil, but he simply didn't leave a lasting mark. So the choice was obvious. Taharqa. Introduced very early in the game with his own dedicated questline, Taharqa, or better known as a scarab, is seen rebuilding a city called Letopolis that had been buried under sand. At first, he appears calm, friendly, and the perfect family man, which, in hindsight, is a perfect disguise for someone like him. Even Bayek trusted him, so much so that he didn't even suspect anything, until Taharqa captured him, buried him alive under the sand, and left him to die. That's when we truly saw who he was, a twisted maniac who genuinely enjoyed suffering and labeled it as growth. What makes him dangerous isn't his combat skill or physical build, it's his method. On a daily basis, he buries his enemies beneath the scorching sun and leaves them to die. Sometimes he even returns just to watch them suffer and even denying them water. That's some next level shit. He was so careful about hiding his true nature that he cut out his own father's tongue because he knew too much. And honestly, who knows what else he might have done. In the end, Bayek finally puts an end to his tyranny. But you know what the strangest part is? He dies believing his legacy will live on. A truly disturbing man if you ask me. You can argue that Mirage is a weaker title in terms of writing and presentation, and you wouldn't be wrong. But even then, it did a few things really well in its own way. The game offered a relatively short experience that balanced story, gameplay, and historical accuracy. It was heavily promoted as a return to the roots for the series, which was partially true. Some old school elements came back along with some new ones. One of these elements was its small but congested Order roster. The game featured only 5 Order members operating in Baghdad. A couple of them felt genuinely threatening, while the rest of them were fairly mediocre. Among the dangerous ones, a scholar from the House of Wisdom stood out. Fahim Fazil. You could argue that Al-Mardikhwar or even Kabiha, the head of the Order, should take this spot. But both of them are relatively straightforward in their roles. Fahim, on the other hand, is terrifying for a different reason. He disguises himself as a harmless old man, and that is exactly what makes him dangerous. As one of the first scholars of the House of Wisdom, he perfectly hid his identity in plain sight. When Basim first meets him, he too is completely deceived. And as always, hiding in plain sight is far more dangerous than being openly hostile. From the shadows, Fahim pulled the strings. He abducted patients and experimented on them using his machine called Al-Ruh. Through it, he exposed his victims to visions of the Isu, slowly driving them insane before eventually killing them off. But it didn't stop there. His obsession with the first civilization ran so deep that he executed even his own allies who learned too much about his research. At times, he even staged events across Baghdad to divert attention away from his experiments. Although Basim eventually kills him, Fahim's work leaves a lasting mark. And even his death unlocks truths that continue to haunt Basim, questions that linger with him until the very end of the game. Valhalla featured multiple storylines, some optional and some directly tied to the main narrative. One of these was the Order of the Ancient storyline, similar to what Odyssey did with the Cults of Cosmos. In Valhalla, the Order members were fewer in number. Some of them were almost harmless, like they didn't leave an impression. Just look at him. He's just here for the sake of being here. But others? They were genuinely horrifying and even deeply involved in the main story. Among them, one figure stands above the rest. Fulke the Paladin. In many ways, she mirrors Fahim Fazil from Mirage in her obsession with the Isu, but she takes it a step further. Fulke doesn't just study the Isu, she merges them with Christianity, creating her own twisted ideology and vision of the world. She's first introduced as an ally to Basim, Sigurd, and Eivor. Then slowly, she begins to see something special in Sigurd specifically. She manipulates him into believing that he's a god destined for a far greater purpose. And when Sigurd eventually offers himself to protect his clan, she breaks him. What follows is some of the darkest and most disturbing implied torture in the entire series. Much of it isn't shown directly, but from the fragments we learn, Fulke was completely unhinged. She chained Sigurd to a chair for days, cut his body, his arm, and pushed his mind to the brink, all in the name of awakening him. Through brutal physical and psychological torment, she forcefully opens his memories of his past life as Tyr. Her methods aren't just cruel, they're inhuman. So extreme that even Eivor, who has seen countless battlefields, nearly loses control upon witnessing what she's done. But what makes Fulke even more unsettling is that she doesn't look like a typical villain. She seems more like a deranged fanatic, someone obsessed with ancient carvings and forgotten gods. And that's exactly the mistake Eivor makes, underestimating her, and one that ultimately shifts the entire direction of the story. For Assassin's Creed 1, things get a little complicated, because the game doesn't give us just one dangerous figure, but two. Al-Mualim and Robert de Sable. And yes, there's a very specific reason why Al-Mualim belongs on this list. So instead of forcing a single choice, why not talk about both? Let's talk about Robert. On paper, Robert de Sable is the most dangerous Templar in AC1. He isn't just a schemer in the shadows, he commands an entire army of knights and serves as the trusted lieutenant of King Richard the Lionheart. Now, from a writing perspective, he's arguably one of the weakest antagonists in the series. Because of limited screen time and minimal character development, he is easy to overlook. But the lore tells us a very different story. Robert actively participated in the Siege of Acre in 1191 and played a key role in its capture. He was even present at the Battle of Arsuf, where Richard's forces shattered Salahuddin's army. Under his leadership, the Templars spread across the Holy Land, establishing influence and power almost everywhere. And he wasn't just dangerous politically. Physically, Robert was a monster. In their first encounter, he outright overpowers Altair, proving himself to be a superior combatant and a genuine battlefield threat. The only reason he feels forgettable is because of how extraordinary Altair himself is. Defeating someone like Robert doesn't make Robert weak. It highlights just how lethal the assassin truly was. Now, Al-Mualim. Technically, he isn't a Templar, but ideologically, he absolutely is. Throughout the entire game, Al-Mualim manipulates Altair into eliminating the Templar leadership, not to stop them, but to replace them. Once they are gone, he uses the Apple of Eden to seize control of Masyaf, and openly declares that humanity must be guided and controlled, which is the very foundation of the Templar philosophy. So, a man with the mindset of a Templar, the wisdom of a mentor, and the combat skill of an assassin. It is far more terrifying than any army, because an enemy you can see can be fought. But an enemy who trained you, shaped you, and believes he is saving the world is the kind no one should ever underestimate. Moving on to the Ezio trilogy, starting with Assassin's Creed 2. This was the game that truly put the franchise on the global map in storytelling, characters, atmosphere, and everything. But since our focus is strictly on the most dangerous Templars, one name immediately stands above the rest: Rodrigo Borgia. And there isn't just one reason for that, there are many. The scary part about Rodrigo is that on your first playthrough you barely notice him, but he's always there, lingering in the background like a shadow pulling the strings. He's the man who ordered the execution of Ezio's family. He even tried to have Ezio killed himself, yet at the time we had no idea who he truly was. Throughout the entire game, Rodrigo is the hidden architect behind almost every major event, believing himself to be the prophet destined to guide humanity onto the so-called true path. And once he becomes Pope, he gains something even more dangerous than an army: absolute authority. With the Staff of Eden in his hands, later combined with the Apple of Eden, he wields godlike power and gives Ezio one of the most brutal fistfights of his life. But he loses it because he's fat. And here's the wildest part. Without Rodrigo, there is no Ezio. Without Ezio, there's no Desmond. And without Desmond, there's no Assassin's Creed. It was Rodrigo who set everything in motion. He created the assassin who would shape history and the future alike. His intelligence, manipulation, and near mastery over the pieces of Eden all prove one thing: he's underrated, but dangerously dangerous as well. And we're not done with the Borgias yet. Right after the events of Assassin's Creed 2, where Ezio spares Rodrigo, another name rises to claim the title of the most dangerous Templar of the era: his son Cesare Borgia. Cesare doesn't just continue his father's legacy, he takes it several steps further. Instead of fighting the assassins from the outside, he strikes at their very heart: the Villa Auditore. He invades Monteriggioni and murders Ezio's uncle, a man who had been a pillar of the Italian assassins for decades. But that was only the beginning. When Ezio reaches Rome, he discovers that Cesare's ambitions are far greater than simple revenge. His goal is to conquer Europe, with Rome as the center of his empire. And this is where things become truly terrifying. Since Cesare is a Templar, which means his conquests aren't just political, they're ideological. He seeks absolute control, and for that he needs the Apple of Eden. His obsession becomes so extreme that he even murders his own father. Rodrigo is poisoned by the very apple he intended to use on Cesare, a plan that failed only because Cesare uncovered it first. Ezio eventually stops him and the apple is taken from his grasp. But even then, Cesare refuses to accept defeat. In a final desperate bid for power, he escapes to Vienna, Spain, leading an army and declaring that no man can kill him. So fate leaves his end not to a blade, but gravity. And the only thing which makes Cesare truly dangerous isn't just his armies, it's his obsession. Revelations is a strange game in many ways. On one hand, it's a powerful showcase of Ezio's skills and mastery. On the other, sometimes feel like the writers phoned it in. One of the areas where this is the most obvious are the main antagonists. The game doesn't really give us high-stakes villains. No Templars who genuinely make us fear them. One is a forgettable jester and the other, well, let's just say he's a big bumbling mess.
Huh?
For this video, there's only one Templar who actually deserves the title of dangerous: Shakulu. By far, he's the only Templar enforcer who truly challenges Ezio. We first see Shakulu shadowing Manuel, seemingly as his bodyguard. But the real showdown comes in the underground city of Cappadocia, where Ezio is hunting Altair's keys and dismantling the Templar plot. In one mission, Ezio witnesses him brutally attacking civilians. He strikes him, but Shakulu survives, turning the tables and forcing Ezio into a proper fight. It's a rare moment in the series where Ezio feels his age. Shakulu's moves are different, calculated, and powerful. Ezio wins, of course, but not without respect for the challenge. What makes him dangerous isn't manipulation or politics, it's his pure muscle and skill. This one was tough. And not because the Templars were intimidating, but because most of them are just terrible. But for the sake of this video, let's settle on Nuno Caro. Why him? Well, he's the man responsible for one of the darkest moments in Yasuke's past, killing his mother right in front of him. Yeah, that's dark. Nuno was a Portuguese slaver, a high-ranking Templar, and the leader of his order. We only see him properly at the very end of the game once the full scope of the Templar conspiracy is revealed. Yasuke faces him in a decent fight, and here's the thing: the character himself is underwhelming. In the lore, however, Nuno is manipulative. He lied to his Templar council about the Imperial Regalia being pieces of Eden, just to keep his projects funded. And he even used groups like the Shinbakufu for his own schemes. In gameplay, he mixes pistols and melee attacks, and that's pretty much it. Honestly, he's not that dangerous, and that's not just on him, it's a problem with almost the entire roster of Order members in Shadows. So yeah. Nuno Caro is the most dangerous Templar here, but only because the bar was pretty low. Alright, let's refresh our minds with Assassin's Creed 4. For many, this game was a first AC experience, and for a good reason. It had everything a great game needs: a gripping story, engaging gameplay, and memorable, meaningful characters. In short, a perfect balance for both new and old fans. And because of that, the antagonists in Black Flag are actually well written. Some are pure Templar extremists, while others operate under the guise of order through control. Now you might think Laureano Torres is the most dangerous of the bunch. No doubt, he's a serious threat. But here's the thing. We know he's dangerous because we see him in the very first act of the game. So nothing about him surprises us. But then there's Benjamin Hornigold. Introduced as Edward's friend, mentor, and a trusted ally, he's the one who shows us the ropes of piracy in Nassau. And early on, he seems like one of the good guys. And because of that, we never see the betrayal coming. At the most crucial moments when the pirates were facing execution, he chose to side himself with the Templars. He betrays his own friends as he knows everything about Edward, the pirates, and Nassau. And his actions indirectly led to Blackbeard's death, who was in fact Edward's closest ally and friend. As a result, Edward is left with no choice but to confront him, and in the end, Hornigold dies at Edward's hand. And that's the key takeaway. An ally turned enemy is far more dangerous than an enemy you already expect to fear. Doubling down on the ally turned enemy theme, we have Assassin's Creed Rogue, a game that's literally built around that idea. We know how Shay became a Templar, so there's no need to linger on that. But Shay isn't just a Templar, he becomes the Templar. As a former assassin, he knows the Brotherhood's deepest, darkest secrets, and exactly how to exploit them. The moment he sees their incompetence, he severs all ties and devotes himself to undoing what the assassins have done, with ruthless efficiency. And he doesn't stop at those responsible for the Lisbon disaster. He dismantles the assassin order from all sides, capturing forts, liberating districts, and burning their strongholds to the ground. He strips their holds over the Atlantic, leaving only one assassin standing: Achilles. He doesn't do it entirely alone though, but he annihilates most of the Brotherhood with ease. So Shay isn't just a fighter, he's a strategist. A perfect hybrid of assassin skill and Templar ruthlessness. Without him, Hayden wouldn't have succeeded in eliminating the colonial assassins. So in short, Shay is the literal definition of death for the assassins. Speaking of Hayden, we all know who he is, the son of Edward Kenway and the father of Connor Kenway. And the surname Kenway says it all. From a very young age, he was trained by Edward, but before Edward could reveal his heritage, he was killed by the Templars. Because of that, Hayden ended up with the combined training of both assassins and Templars, much like Shay. And thanks to his exceptional skills, he killed the mentor of the British assassins and was then sent to America to establish his own order, with himself as their Grand Master. And this is where he goes nuts. During his time in America, he establishes a stronghold over the colonies and recruits several members who aided him in his quest, all thanks to his mastery of manipulation. And he also hooks up with a Native American baddie along the way. Anyway, after meeting Shay, he fully launches the eradication of the assassins and controls America from the shadows. But when Connor enters the picture, Hayden tries to manipulate him as well, but fails, which leads to a one-on-one fight between the two, a fight where it's heavily implied he doesn't hold back and truly wants to kill him. Now that's dangerous. In Unity, we're introduced to a new side of the Assassin's Creed, a world where assassins and Templars pursue a common goal of peace, even if it means a temporary truce between them. A lot of people praise Unity for its assassin vibe, but criticize it for its story and writing. Because of that, the villains we get are mediocre at best, more political and talkative than actually dangerous. Out of the bunch, the only Templar who did feel like a real threat, and I repeat, a threat only because of the circumstances, was Germain. The reasons are pretty simple. First of all, he's a sage, which means he has prior knowledge of every Isu site in the world, and after his conspiracy, he becomes a Grandmaster, giving him power above all else. And this makes him a thorn in the side of both assassins and Templars. In the final battle, he wields the Sword of Eden and nearly destroys the temple. Fortunately enough, Arno manages to put a stop to him. Underwhelming? Sure. But dangerous? 100%. To many, Syndicate is considered the last true Assassin's Creed game, and I get where they're coming from. But let's not dive into that debate because we already have a dedicated video on the channel for it. And since we're talking about the most dangerous Templars, Syndicate has plenty, but they're scattered, with each of them being different in their own way. For many, that's a good thing, as it gives each protagonist their own challenge, but for me personally, I find it like, meh. Anyway, the most dangerous Templar has to be Maxwell Roth. Why not Starrick? Because he's one-dimensional. We don't see him doing much besides sitting on his throne and being evil for the sake of being evil. Like, bro doesn't even touch grass. Roth, on the other hand, has something called influence. He's manipulative and clearly uses Jacob for his own agenda, overthrowing Starrick because he's sick of him. He also controls the Blighters, a rival gang to the Rooks, and being their leader gives him real power over London. He is strange and insane in his own way, but that's who he is. Roth was literally willing to sacrifice children and innocents to achieve his objectives. So even though he's not the final boss, Roth leaves a bigger mark than Starrick ever did, and cements himself as the most dangerous Templar in Syndicate. And as always, before going towards the ranking, here are some honorable mentions. Warren Vidic from the original Assassin's Creed Modern Day, Juhani Otzelberg from Rogues Modern Day, Marquis de Fayette from Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, Zhang Yong from AC Chronicles China, and Madeline from AC Liberation. You know the names, you know their feats, you know where they lie. But for this video, let's rank them. If we talk about raw power and brutality, then in the top 3 we have Demos, Shay, and Shakulu. Now, if we focus purely on their influence and strategic reach, we have Rodrigo Borgia, Haytham Kenway, and Cesare Borgia. And if we consider all of the above categories into one, then in the first place we have Haytham, Shay on second, and Cesare on third. It might cause a bit of controversy, but the facts are there. And this leads us to the end of this video. We hope you guys loved it, as a lot of time and effort gets put into making such content for you. And if you have any questions, then feel free to drop them in the comments, and subscribe for more interesting content regarding Assassin's Creed. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Till then, goodbye.